I put you to sleep with nonsense, nonsense architecture. The cathedral, intersectional moldings, Venice, Florence, the basilica, the cathedral of ruin. Explain with remarkable limits what is described, the best brick, the lowly order of material. Better work, the best whose range we shall see. Other conditions, what remarkable limits of certain materials its maker has sacrificed to build it. Architecture, conversations with an artist, resplendence of color, the understanding of form and space, ordinances, some divine spaces meant to bring the profane up to the sacred. It is supposed to exist as stated elsewise, somewhat remarkable, and in the balance of straightening form, the curve, the bulwark, and the transparent gates. The rascal will build the pretty building, the fulfillment of thence inconvenience, as well as checkered patterns. Such ornaments are found upon the common sense of the will. We distribute them. They've given us their treatment. We walk their halls in admiration. The delicate niche work of the French Gothic. There is an occasional burst upwards, and we can only look up. Observe how the Renaissance characters, their noble proportions, 100 feet above the ground. Some statues are hidden, the recesses of the rose window, the very spirit of the style, well finished, full of expression, and delicately wrought. The effective perfection of natural light in the space. It is calculated to bounce around, and the resulting arrangement is kind of the topmost of the work. We cannot afford the bellet and the dart and the delicate bas-reliefs. So again, the modes of sculpture meet with the architectural of the execution of common materials, built by common workmen, executing considerable art. We have seen bad work in architecture, yet some of it, caskets of work in gnawing frost, its decoration, leaving us in awe. Adding a general enrichment through flower moldings, the character of proportion, Florence full of its attire, comparing all of the uppermost parts, the quality is effective, and it is remembered by every fine ancient building. Florence, already alluded to, has a penetrative division of quantity and quality, an exquisite essence. However, one Renaissance maker, perhaps he was a common man, he brought the very spirit of it into his tools, and there we have the lovely arcade, the entire facade besought with delicate ornation, keeping the building with dignified repose, and giving awe to all that stare upon it. It is a treatment that we must consider not only for its workmanship, but also the way that it goes in terms of statuesque circuits, recesses blossoming unrestrainedly, the patterned mosaic, the Italian work of the time, deep shadows that relieve the shafts of the advanced pediment, and the fortune of the stately become humble. Well finished and well observable, in the Collins Sepulchre, the Chapel of Bergamo, and other such buildings. Finally, we may go to the decoration of the decorative power. Its roughness has become meaningful. Years of labor have gone into it. The greatness of the Northern Gothic contrasted with the humble, delicate squares of shadow. It shall not be offended by the hand of the sculptor. No limit of ornament overcharged. The gate, I suppose, must be round. There are 4 niches, 176, far more elaborate than the others. Not a leaflet is left. It is nobly bestowed with filigree. The uninquiring eye even may behold a sort of grandeur in its simplicity. The variegated mosaic, thicker and thinner throughout the styles. Its majesty is in its mystery, an unbroken vault, one luxuriant, inquiring, minute detail. It increases ever yet the deep-wrought stone's inherent beauty. Misty masses, pinnacles and diadems, the multitudinous towers witnessed perhaps by the fear of nations. Victory, wealth, authority, they have all been seen by these stately, quiet observers. We may dream in those vaulted gate, the trellised and the closed leaves, marked likeness to their humble muse. The dusky, strange twilight comes through the stained glass. Kindness it seems to prevent from turning into pride. The partisan remains with it, foundations continually crushed. Botticelli determines the weight of the attaching filigree. Do not cast them aside. They stand for ages. It just be as though stone itself has taken the form of truth and art, which none can ignore. There is some thoughtfulness in the suggestion of the mode of a structure, its support, its roofs, its architectural deceits might be broadly considered. They sit arised, they are bound and concealing an anatomy of consideration, narrow jointed lines, an upward frill, an unassisted and unconfessed strength within its very beams. The true nature of things might be deduced by the Gothic style. Dexterous artifices compel us forward. Fibers seem concealed in their pillars. They are standing without deceit. They hold the roof, generally for necessity, and also for harbor. Something of the flying buttresses reminds us that deception will not be forever. We are sustained by the arches overtop. We are in an intermediate range of chapels and aisles, the choir halls and their supporting piers. The buttress becomes more than a decorative member. It becomes very strength. The whole arrangement is carried exquisitely on the pinnacle. The curve, the much calculated load-bearing pinnacle, the basket of hollow crown, the traces of the last and most refined forms. Ancient walls have had much to say on this matter. They are greatly thinned, and yet even through millennia they speak of the voice of man, pining after the spectre. Principles of art there come together, bringing the abstract into the habitable. A new system of architectural laws seems to have been found there. The resultant sense of proportion, the laws of angle and load coming together into a great necessity, formed by materials and intention. What is usually distorted in the haphazard erection of simple buildings becomes a whole new sort of experience. It's not mere nails and wooden architecture, a construction based upon need alone. It is a consistency of style reaching beyond its mere function. The Gothic architect understood the shoulderings of stone, construction of the Brunelleschi iron chain, a central tower, the builders of Salisbury and their elaborate, intertwining sophistry of grain and heap. For as the cement may be poured, the stone has been poured, as it were, for ages past. The derogate dignity of work there are inseparable of the spectre, being derogate mortar simply as such. It is possible with their mere weight and strength to render us awestruck. The Cathedral of Prato has much to say about this. The pretty lintel of the lateral door, the cathedral, where its visibly separate stones are of alternate marble. They cannot be understood until we see their underside, the cross-cutting, how each block was given its best chance of noble submission. Having done that, a costly arrangement becomes an adaptation, a place for succor for a weary traveler. What is the distinctive character of the Milan Cathedral? It is covered in elaborate fan tracery. It represents marble and what is beyond it. The supposition of the material itself is an invitation. The Sistine Chapel itself, its architectural design, grisaille, Ming, and then the figures on its frescoes. The effect of the whole is an increased dignity and solace. Painting has no deception here. It does not assert authority over the bare materials. One might hide behind a covert. One might betoken fields with severity, the primal purpose of architecture being decoration. We know that these things are worse for the wearer because of former, worse painters grossly thus applied. Correggio, the decorative landscapes at the extremity of arcades and alleyways, the architecture of walls, things having a certain pleasure in them, things meant for idleness. The pediments of the altar frameworks also are decorated. It is an excusable error if it has been neglected. Pews emerge in the house of prayer. We may visit but once, and yet the entrance and the very noble experience will remain. It is a museum to ambition, not aligned with practicality. Granite afterwards might be encountered. Memnon himself, London alone, the design of instance, Where there may have been painful ugliness in form, it was brought into latticed white glass. Concealment, balmed as falsity, becomes innocent in its bare strength. Things which were obstacles are now central. It is not lavish vanity. It is a noble pursuit in which nature herself is brought into the fold for man's highest artistic achievement. We may dispense with semblance here. We may be forgiven to lavish vanity upon too far a removal from nature. Stones of Venice, their great mosaic form, external slabs facing out, the marble facing in. Nevertheless, the noble substance of ornament does not diminish even when it is unseen. True colors of architecture, not less true than such practices. It is true that whatever surfaces may need enrichment will find a way to attain it. There are natural stones by which this may be done. The natural fallacy of a substitute of cast or machine work for the hand is generally forgiven when the ornament itself has a cluster of weeds growing around it for a century. The dishonesty of the imperiled imitation is replaced by recoveries and intents through toil. A hard wrought ornament can no more be generally known from machine work, except at closest examination. Honor disdains false ornament. We may pretend that it doesn't command carved crockets, but the harmony of both depends on the 18th chapter. Worth is, it says, where the vulgar economist's sense takes away that diverse form which is essential in the being, the thing that does not justify itself, but is there, fancied. Vercelli are among cut and richest in Italy, the former being grotesquely permanent, as some might see it, but the must and the worth of the diamond is simply understanding the time it took to make it. I believe the human land and the human hand was seen in Florence to be every part of every building. Fusible materials of clay, bronze, iron, these may be supposed to be the clearest rendition. They make the mold, and the Gothic aisles, delighting the senses of overreaching grandeur. There is a certain trickery about them, an ingenious device, putting the whole force of our fancy into an arrangement of form, caring no more how the masses maybe have come about, but started as pencil on a paper. The Professor Willis confines his observations to an interesting and rude penetration of past attempts. Here we see the quarterfoil above, the countenances of every clumsy shape have drawn into expanded fullness, an exquisite example of the decoration of the buttresses of Rouen, the moldings in detail, the undeclining Gothic architecture of progress, the retrograde, the parallels of branching mountain outliers, a gradual rise of a curve, the valley of the western sun bouncing off stone, and more importantly, the radial outliers, isolated branches central to the alley. There have been many penetrating shapes with watch. There is on the site an unparalleled notion of great pause. illustrations of such, irrelevant to our singular purpose. Yet still they catch the eye. They still catch the eye of the observer, the proportion being carefully pointed out, with particular attention bestowed upon it. The stone a rude border of molding, the penetrating shape has received a possible expansion. And the feature which is the clearest, understood and found with the treatment of the moldings. With great principled truth, it seems, these have been wrought. The contained form, annihilating beauty and dignity as others have done, becomes at once their fulfillment and more. Composed of a single stone, some of the spires of Salisbury, in smaller vertical gables, a double cavetto decorated with ball flowers. It may seem clumsy in its simplicity, the horizontal plane of windows, the unassuming line of perspective it intersperses, the proportion of their curves, the crossing of contact of the Norman arcade, a spandrel in the drawing of shafts near the door. There are different moldings which were studiously associated. A variety of intersectional lines grew there. Earlier workmen did not know what they were working on. It was with precision that they laid the foundation of what was to develop over 100 years into the architect's fastidious vision. Every shaft was wrong for the small, but the pendant base grounded there, exhibiting the technical dexterity of work and calculated to a hair's breadth. The slight and hardly detectable profile of the shaft, 2 small pilasters fastened with stitches through a junction. The sections taken respectively at different levels. They support the lost statues of the porch. Very interesting is one of them, simple with vertical cuts. They sit on pedestals, the one daughter of the other. The upper portion meets exactly the plane of the side, the projecting part on the outer one becoming similarly diagonal. These support each other while remaining to appear independent. Saint Gervais at Falaise, in whose molding section is given, looks rude at first, with a flat fillet cut off at sharp angles. The truncation is more for pleasure than any arch moldings. While we regret the boldness of the stroke, we cannot defy the authority of all the capitals and the lines of intersections which knew more than we did in our silly refusal to accept it. The style is an earlier exaggeration of one found similarly in Germany. Its imitation is owing to the stone of dovetailing wood, the fallacious system 3 times reduplicated there, 6 times intersposed and intersected with itself. Their natural directions end shortly and are passed through the asp. It is carried through then from eccentric extremities. The treatment of the liny molden comes through the flattened arch, the shrunken pillar, the extorted, extravagant foliation. The Renaissance also was deprived of unity that swept away all the great dynasties. Medieval architecture only remains. We might assume that the semblance is one of surrender. They had endeavored to create a classical Romanist type of architecture. They were sworn down with bleak promontories to create houses of prayer. They buried their altars. The earth, which the fields took over, destroyed many of those that were never brought to fruition. Departing there, with thrilling influence, a more prideful and stately palace has dusted up through gold. Through the dimness, a white image under vaults, foundations numberless. It is with sympathy that architecture beckons us with nature herself into a special vantage point. Many ingenious adaptations of construction have been attempted, and the trolling powers of nature have claimed many of them with mocking laughter. Yet even so we have still today a melancholy mix of emulated sublimity positioning itself on the plane of Marengo. He can command, and yet still his only thing through all regret is the opposition of archways, the architectural contending with sublimity, masses built upon transfer of dateless hills. Earthquakes having stolen from them many buildings before. There is a sublimity that is reached, and then not only that, but the rest of the large resources might come together with a carved archway, inclining outwards, which no time will destroy. The Cathedral of Florence is an example. The highest portions are felt. The dome or the tower, the cross of the church, all of these cases tower over us. The angle and symmetry are felt. Its preeminence is apparent, and one need not put words to the experience. The spire, whether therefore bounding line or coping, the Vieccio of Florence, the character overhanging itself, the Greek cornice, the Duomo of Florence was far grander than any other. One line rises from the sea. It is needful to set it forth in its magnitude. Considered among many dividing walls, the Greek temple has nothing but they freeze the bare. The testable, perpendicular object, the wall surface, the wall as a confession itself. The weight of earth springs about it, a brick or a bit of jasper, divided lines of Genoa, serpentine with snow, a surface wide and bold, signatures upon it, the sublime architecture of cube and spear and relative solids of progression. The expedient course is a continued series of forms, especially of surface and division. Its terminal lines, the four small arches, the magnificent arrangements, the building's most dignified length being confined to the lower parts. The surface observes the association of square and circle. And then the first certain organization, meanly measured, and the proportionate diminishment in size from there on. The shafts and the columns in one piece, the massy lintels, the alcoves, the bricks of smaller stones. It is inevitable masonry, chosen for their outlines, rendered precious, general forms exhibited by power there, the magnitude of the average. Cumberland, Scotland, Wales, all have events introducing such marked elemental sublimity. The size of their buildings once reached the mark of majesty. It matters, being built of very small stones, nearly equal in size, or deficient with mechanical resource, yet their joints are scarcely visible. Covered with a trellis, the masonry is generally accommodated to the natural and frank and sometimes heaping vastness it accommodates. Only in this respect for material may we begin to understand the springing vaults and swelling domes, the sums that are chiseled, the stones that are polished came from the quarry. They would always raise a building or a story higher than the next masonry. To consider the design itself, the designs are necessarily into the masses of light or shade of traced lines. Henry VII's chapel is pure linear division, and sufficiently recollected, we may see a canvas surface there, broad, freshly laid gesso, a fair thing that most architectural features cause light to cleave to. There is a certain resistance to the supremacy of the worker, subduing the material in iron resistance. He must overcome the material and labor ingeniously to create the delicate design, and that the stone's softness comes through. There is a certain mountainous heart within it. Thus, having done so, by chief means of sublimity, the power of architecture is made manifest. There we may find rest or pleasure. There is a certain human sympathy we experience when we see the work wrought by generations. The quantities of the sameness, the relative varied subjects of their symmetry, arranged in groups, but apparently accidental. When color is employed, we are compelled to make many allowances, given that we must avail ourselves of an artistic bent as well as one, the instinct for shelter. Among these habits, there are proportions of value, something like equal weight, large masses, and equivalent expression. Rembrandt may have done so. Captured in many paintings are some architectural features. The distinction in architecture is necessarily in varying degrees. The significance of a flat space cannot be overstated. The term applied to Milton is generally the case. The mass has been treated, the forms of bas-relief the Greeks were so famous for. These characteristics having thus both flat and rounded edges terminated at right angles. The decorative feature of Roman work, the curvular masses, the gradation of dome or column. Plain speaking must be beautifully rounded if it is to capture the squareness, the pillar, the primal arrangements of stone. The more artful Greek capital, the Byzantine light and shade, the rolling heap thundercloud, almost gathered in the sterner stone of the stone found there. Like a mountain, its nobleness, the architecture of the Byzantine with varied succession, the architectural center of a gate, endeavored to give some idea of the inspiration of those days. Surrounded by flowing leafage, the architectural lightness, the delicacy of detail gives an illusion of breadth of light. The simple quadrant, the light dying on an arranged surface, is absolutely subordinated to the masses of light and shade beyond it. With a manner somewhat cramped and cold, some areas less express their assent to the great same law. But the rounding of the ruling form is no less sought and felt. The pediment given is exactly similar to that Byzantine capital, being rounded under the abacus of 4 branches, thistle leaves, springing from angles, their stems bending outwards, forming 2 degrees of delicate spines. Saint Lo, simpler elements found there. Its cylindrical, capriciously renewed pedestals and niches, statues of tabernacle work, arranged into a richly rounded tower. The reader might compare, the sewer might compare, and the worksmith also. There they come together in the effect of intention, one person looking at the architectural drawing, the other adding grace that might replace the main effect. Giotto endeavored especially to mark these points of purpose. Withdrawn entirely from the traceries, the Cathedral of Florence, with its delicate lines, its double tracery, the latter half having been destroyed, is laid upon snow. Because of the effective intentions there, Giotto entirely affects. The tracery depends upon its design, its lines and moldings, the foliaged cups. Much of the lightness comes here through the decoration. We may observe the thick slabs of stone, but the full spirit comes through the decoration. The Masonic operations are humble servants to the decoration. Multiplied, finally, they lose their individual character. The eye is made to rest and move on, and come finally to the great gate, the central Gothic power. The wall surface has a purity of the plan inherent in it. The Byzantine mosaic fretwork, laying aside its ornaments one by one, is a model of the domestic Gothic, the northern and the southern similarly. We may carefully and carelessly overlook these things, because the magnificence of the mass itself strikes with rust and unstained ornament. The Venetian, over the exuberance of imagination, has the power to tamp on our shoulder. The cusp is usually quite sharp. Those massy balls and leveled cusps of stone, representing the berries and the cups of eternity. In earlier times, cylindrical masses, its molding having become a series of concavities edged by delicate fillets, though less total taking place, the flowerwork itself taking the honorable tracery. It is the making of ribs and veins, the trefoil of light formed by these berries and acorns. The bovius, the brackets, the flamboyant traceries, though sharply undercut, the moldings nearly adhere to the stone. In increasing intricacy, their precise carpentry multiplying through horizontal lines who seem at first to contradict those of the architect. But we cannot fail to see that one has given power to the other, a conspicuous sharpness, an interesting, precise, directional carpentry, very often more delightful than the owl's eyes first shown. The weight of shadow is considered there. The holly clover, the boldly traced promontories. In Kent, and the forsworn nuns took shelter there, the azure hills beyond, and lonely the stone in the midst of sailing birds is brought to the field for a singular purpose. Architectural beauty and imitative form, the members themselves, an unimaginative precision of a volo, the natural curve, the frequent occurrence, and even so its endeavor will be shortly traced. They are undertaken by and by, called decoration and architecture, without any expression of dislike. There is no iconic capital exceedingly base that might not farther progress. It is dependent upon precision, the natural curve, the architectural innovation. The commonest of all characteristics may be inferior, but are brought together